Jason Beck is a Canadian pianist, producer, and songwriter. He has collaborated with Daft Punk, Feist, Drake, and Pulp's Jarvis Cocker. In 2009, he earned a place in the Guinness Book of World Records for a marathon 27-hour solo piano performance. He has gained a large following on YouTube, where he releases Pop Masterclasses, a series in which he deconstructs the music of his peers. Living in Cologne, Beck is better known by his stage name Chili Gonzales. Stay tuned as we unearth one of music's best-kept secrets. Gonzales began experimenting with the piano at an early age. He took lessons from his grandfather and gained inspiration from his brother, the famous film composer Christoph Beck.
Fairly early on, from the moment my grandfather showed it to me, I would revisit the piano without his supervision and explore it in a different way than what he was showing me. I had many teachers along the way and always had a healthy curiosity to discover the piano for myself, but always in parallel to the sort of instruction I was given. My brother is a film composer, and for a while he was probably trying to be a good piano student for my grandfather. He was, maybe it's to do with birth order, one never really knows, but somehow I was already a bit like, I'll take what I like out of this and the rest I'll leave, and otherwise I'm going to sort of explore this on my own. And my brother sort of went a little bit further. By the time we were 12 or 13, he was like a very promising classical pianist with a very serious piano teacher, and I was like messing around on the drums, trying to sort of make music with my buddies and stuff like that.
In 1990, Gonzales formed Sun, a Canadian alternative rock band. Despite being signed to Warner Brothers for a 3-album deal, the band failed to find mainstream success.
What I was doing in Canada was very muddled, and I was being pulled in many directions at once, and I was believing, or I was hearing a lot of advice that you have to choose if you want to be taken seriously or if you want to be an entertaining figure. I signed a record deal with Warner Brothers Canada and made an album. And when I went into that, I sort of had a naive belief that all I had to do was make the music I wanted to make, and that was the end of the job. And I just didn't realize that you have to tell a story that gives context to your music. And if you don't take control of that story, a story will be created for you that you might not like. That's kind of what I went through in Canada. I sort of was blindsided by how I was putting so much into the music that was, at the time, I thought, misunderstood by people. And I guess it's a naive reflection to think it must be them who have the problem of misunderstanding. But by the time I moved to Berlin, and by the time I recorded that song, I knew that I was going to take control of my story. I was going to begin essentially self-mythologizing.
Disillusioned with the music scene in Canada, Jason Beck moved to Europe in 1998, where his eclectic persona found a more receptive audience.
Europe was the place where I could show how they are perceived by the New World in a strange way. So there's a strange effect that happens when I come to Europe by referring so much to a kind of European legacy, especially of classical music. At the same time, my entertainment sensibilities mean that I'm, for them, essentially making, you can say vulgar, you can say up to date, however you want to put it, I'm trying to fit into what I think is today's realistic musical landscape and find a way to sort of use that legacy to be a modern day sort of conceptual entertainer, with my material being the sort of ruins of European classical music. So it's strange that I'm in Europe able to get that across, but I think it makes sense because the average European has more knowledge of the references that I'm sort of bringing up to date than North Americans do.
He released 3 experimental albums under the German record label Kitty Yo, scoring his first hit with club favourite Let's Groove Again.
Say another long farewell. This time next year, I'll be overseas and over you. Let's groove again. Let's groove again. Worst of friends is how the best of times will end. This time next year, you can find me on the river's end. Let's groove again. Let's groove again.
When I thought of the artist name I wanted to use after I moved to Berlin in 1998, I cycled through a bunch of different names, some of which were briefly printed on flyers for some concerts. One of them was Wolfstein. One of them was Mr. Wolf. So I had a kind of Wolfgang obsession after moving to Germany because of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And because of my look back then, which I had more pronounced sideburns and sort of a bit wilder hair, and people just seemed to call me Wolf, and it just seemed to fit. And then at some point I realized I didn't want any of these wolf-centric names. I wanted something more like a rapper would choose. So I was looking for something more rapperly. And the thing with rap names is generally you don't often choose them for yourself. They're kind of nicknames that are given to you, but I wasn't really in a situation where people would give me names, but it somehow happened one night, and it was Chili Gonzales that this person just looked at me. I hardly knew them, and they said, "You look like you should be called Chili Gonzales." And I thought, this is about as close as I'll get to sort of having a nickname bestowed upon me, as I think most rappers had. And I thought I'd rather claw my way up from a ridiculous name than to try to have to live up to a serious name. And I just said, fuck it. And I just went with it. And it was, in a way, very impulsive, and the decision was taken fairly quickly. But if I really didn't like something about it, a few months later, I would have tried something else. And it did end up sticking. And so at certain moments, I felt like it should be Gonzales, but not Chili Gonzales. But Chili Gonzales was always the name. It came to me fully formed with those two elements. It's just that for some albums, I decided that it should be called Gonzales up until 2009 when I finally decided to add the chili, and more for marketing reasons of, Google friendliness and all that.
Chili Gonzales' influences span genres and generations, from classical masters such as Mozart and Steve Reich to rapper Drake and electro-pop masters Daft Punk.
Well, I'm really into the translatability of styles. So I realized as I was falling in love with different modern styles of music over the years, whether it was rap in my 20s, electronic music in my 30s, I just always feel like, well, there must be a way to, without using the obvious instruments that would mark it as rap or electronic music. In the case of electronic music, it's kind of in the title, as the British would say. It does what it says on the tin. It's electronic, but is there a way to go to a non-electronic instrument and find some way of translating those styles? So a lot of those styles, what they have in common is that they use machines. What machines generally do to music is they sort of flatten the dynamics. And so I got very interested in trying to flatten dynamics as I played the piano as a way to possibly create the feeling of rap, the feeling of electronic music. And, there's that very famous D.R.E song, which is still Dre, right? So that's a pretty, in a way, versatile musical information, right? You could imagine a classical pianist kind of like, and in this case, that classical piano player would be trying to sort of summon some romantic energy that has to do with extreme expressivity, a lot of peaks and valleys, and this one's loud, this one's not, this one's fast, this one's slow. That's the sort of dramatic way that the 19th century taught musicians to think about what the arc of music should be. Whereas the idea of sampling that's in rap music or of using drum machines in electronic music tends to be about creating something that's very samey. And so it's kind of like freezing one of those moments that would be in that romantic piece, and sticking with it, right? So just take that one, the kind of medium soft one, and just do it over and over again, freezing that moment in time, that one note. That's what sampling really is. You listen to an old disco track, right? And the DJ's like, oh, I like that bit that goes. So he goes in with his machine, he literally snips it out with digital scissors, and he's got like a button that he pushes. And every time he pushes the button, it goes. It's like pushing a button in which a huge amount of musical information that a human kind of poured out of themselves is now just one button on a machine. And so you just zoom out, and a rap beat then becomes something like this D.R.E piece would then just be this. I literally have trained myself to be able to try to hit the piano with the exact same volume and intention, and to always leave a little bit of space to detach each of those chords, going for precisely the opposite effect that the sort of romantic dude would have gone for, which was everything's a little bit different. It's constantly evolving and changing. Here, you want to take that frozen moment and just keep on repeating it. And the same can go for electronic music. I have a piece called Night Moves, which was specifically meant to sort of evoke the sort of rigid, machine-like pace that you get from using a drum machine. I like the idea of the human trying to be a perfect robot, but failing in some way. So I've, again, trained myself to play a piece like Night Moves, which here would be the non-electronic music version. More like a 60s folk song, or almost like a gentle guitar type approach, But the way I would play it, if I wanted to evoke electronic music, it would just go like this. So I'm a human, imitating a machine, and maybe weirdly the piece sounds more modern and more poetic because I can never quite get there.
In 2014, Gonzales won a Grammy for his contribution to Daft Punk's album Random Access Memories.
They wanted me to build a bridge between two sections of the album, two songs, which were in some different keys, and so they wanted a little bit of musical sleight of hand. They wanted to go from this key to this key, and so it's a little bit like the camera angle changes, or it's a little bit like I always think of scenes in movies where someone pretends to be two people by having half a beard, and then they like just go through the little mailbox hole and they just show the bearded half of their face, and the person's like, oh, I'm talking to a guy with a beard, and then they're like, oh, let me get the boss. Then the boss comes and he's like, the other side is up against the mailbox hole, and so you see a clean shaven guy. You assume it's two different people, right? I mean, who would shave just half their face and have half a beard just to pull off this trick and seem like two people? Well, that's exactly what I did musically. So, we're in this key ending from the first song, and this chord is like a beard, But then we suddenly go to the next chord, and it's like, he doesn't have a beard. That's a different guy.
Rapper Drake used Gonzales' solo piano piece, The Tourist, as an outro on his mixtape, So Far Gone.
Right around the time that mixtape, which is called So Far Gone, came out, and I was interviewed before I'd heard what he'd even done with it, and just the interviewer just sprang on me. Did you know that your solo piano piece has been sampled on Drake's latest mixtape? And I said, no, but I don't like Drake. Screw Drake. And then I went online and I finally found what he had done. In fact, he didn't sample it and make a song out of it. It's an interlude on his mixtape near the end. And he just added the sound of a champagne bottle popping. And then you hear the song in its entirety. And so you sort of understand, like, Drake is going to pop some champagne and just chill for a little while. And all of a sudden I was, extremely flattered on one end of things. Because he used the entire piece of music and just let it play. It's valuable real estate on a rapper's mixtape for a few minutes being taken up by my piano playing. I look for something that's in me that is worth exaggerating and that will communicate to people. So yeah, I'm currently wearing slippers. It's how I'm most comfortable. And I am often in my bathrobe for many hours of the day, as many people can probably imagine. It fits to me. If it doesn't fit, then it's contrived. End of story, But you live out a fantasy up there. And if you're honest about your fantasy, then you're going to find that one thing, I don't know, when you see the if you think of the Daft Punk robots, not any musicians can pull off acting like robots. It fits with the music. It fits with them personally. It fits with the songs in which you hear very sad songs sung by robots, and there's something very touching about how the robots look, and they really took great care to make sure it was the right helmets and the right look, that you saw something that touched you emotionally, It would have been very easy to screw up that whole concept for another band. And generally, I believe there's a no masks rule in music. Musicians with masks, there's basically only one group that's pulled it off, Daft Punk. Even MF Doom is on the borderline. Piano virtuoso would not think that it's difficult to play a 3-note melody, but for someone who respects rap music and how rhythm is used and how repetition is used, for me to know that there are thousands of different ways to play, for example, someone might go, and it's like, what did you say? And someone might be very ham-fisted and play only with one finger. I'm not looking either, so this is really...
Gonzales is currently finishing a concept album written in collaboration with Jarvis Cocker. Room 29 is due for release in spring 2017.
Room 29 is the album that we're here to mix in collaboration with, for me, an English folk hero named Jarvis Cocker, who I'm sure most listeners know, which will be coming in the spring on the esteemed Deutsche Grammophon label.
He will play at the Sound Unbound Festival on April the 29th at the London Barbican. Sound Unbound is a weekend of music performances without the conventions that surround classical concerts. Tickets are on sale now from the Barbican website.
I like I like the fact that I am on the way to some kind of mastery over my main instrument, the piano. It's a lifelong quest that I'll never, obviously, really, you never say you've mastered it, but I'm on the way. But I also appreciate the contrast that can have with trying new things that I'm not good at. I think that's part of what I talked about with overtraining, is that there's always a danger when you're overtrained to lose sight of how someone who isn't trained might experience something. And so part of getting myself out of the comfort zone is using instruments that I'm not particularly good at yet, in combination with the piano, and even trying other things like making a movie or writing a book, or coming up soon, I'm going to start to do a kind of music school that I would like to, a sort of very modern version of what a music school could be, in which I would mentor people, much as Professor X mentored the X-Men to use their mutant powers. Rappers were the ones who inspired me. Rap has taken over, so I think where music is heading is not in this choose to sell out or choose to remain pure false choice, but is going further and further towards make a myth of yourself, turn yourself into a brand, and you will always be considered an artist as well as a sort of beloved figure who can have a big audience.
This documentary was produced by Alan Clarke. Special thanks to Dave Arman, Chris Bradbury and Oliver Thomas. The voiceover links were narrated by Darrell Baldwin.